They called security and forced her off the flight. They thought that was the end of it. They had no idea. She was about to take over everything. Chapter 1: The Arrival. Savannah Cole had always understood the power of time. Every deal she closed, every negotiation she entered, every calculated move in her career came down to one principle. Timing was everything. You could be the smartest person in the room, but if you didn't make your move at the right moment, it didn't matter. And Savannah was a master of the moment. Her career had been built brick by brick in the cutthroat world of aviation finance. She had negotiated multi-billion-dollar aircraft acquisitions, structured deals that made headlines on both Wall Street and in boardrooms in Dubai, Singapore, and London. People knew her name, even if they didn't know her face. She was deliberate about that. She didn't need the limelight. She needed results. On this particular morning, Savannah walked through Los Angeles International Airport like she owned it. Perhaps because, in many ways, she felt she did. Dressed sharply in a tailored navy blazer and a crisp white blouse, her black leather briefcase hung effortlessly from her shoulder. Every step of her black stilettos echoed with purpose as she moved through the terminal. Her flight to Phoenix was routine, a short hop under 2 hours. Another meeting, another high-stakes negotiation that, if successful, could alter the course of a regional airline desperate for new aircraft financing. Savannah had done this before, many times. The flight itself was merely a bridge between closing one deal and setting up the next. She breezed through security, grabbed a double espresso from her favorite coffee spot, and headed toward gate 54A. Everything was routine, until it wasn't. Chapter 2: The Shift. Savannah approached the boarding gate as they called for first-class passengers. She scanned her digital boarding pass, exchanged a polite smile with the gate agent, and made her way down the jet bridge. The cabin door loomed ahead, welcoming her aboard Flight 2086. But the moment she stepped inside, something felt off. There was a shift in the air. A tension, subtle but palpable. The lead flight attendant stood at the front of the cabin. She was in her mid-40s, her blonde hair pulled tightly into a bun that looked like it had been sculpted rather than styled. Her uniform was impeccable, but there was something in her eyes. Not the usual polite professionalism Savannah expected. This was different. Calculating. Assessing. Savannah had seen that look before. In conference rooms where people questioned her credentials. In meetings where male colleagues subtly challenged her authority. It was the silent question. Do you belong here? She ignored it. She had more important things to focus on, closing deals, finalizing numbers. Reaching her destination, she walked down the aisle, glancing briefly at her phone to confirm her seat. 2A. First class. She placed her carry-on in the overhead compartment, settled into her seat, and exhaled. Time to review the notes for her upcoming meeting. But then the flight attendant approached, this time with a forced smile. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass again?" Savannah blinked, confused but composed. She had just shown it moments ago at the gate. Nevertheless, she kept her cool. Without a word, she retrieved her phone and displayed the boarding pass. The attendant barely glanced at it before shaking her head. "There seems to be a mistake," she said curtly. "This seat has already been assigned to another passenger." Savannah frowned, her expression hardening just slightly. "No, 2 is mine. I booked it weeks ago." The woman sighed sharply, irritation flashing in her eyes. "I'll need to check with the gate agent," she replied before walking briskly away. Savannah tapped her fingers against the armrest, her mind racing, not with panic, but calculation. She had spent years navigating spaces where she wasn't expected, where she was often mistaken for someone's assistant instead of the lead financier. But this was different. This was public, and she knew it was about to escalate. Chapter 3: The Confrontation. Minutes passed. Then the flight attendant returned, this time with a male colleague. He looked uncomfortable, as if he didn't want to be there. "Ma'am, we need you to step off the plane," he said quietly. The cabin shifted. Murmurs rippled through the rows of first-class passengers. A couple across the aisle turned their heads to watch. Savannah sat straighter in her seat. "Excuse me." "There's been an issue with your ticket," the male attendant continued. "We need you to deboard so we can sort it out." There was no room for discussion. No alternatives offered. Just a quiet but firm command. Savannah's jaw clenched. "I'm not leaving until you explain why my confirmed seat is suddenly in question." The lead flight attendant folded her arms. The polite mask had completely slipped away. "You're being uncooperative." That word, uncooperative, it was a trigger word, designed to flip a narrative, to turn a simple disagreement into defiance, to make her the problem. More whispers, more eyes. Before Savannah could respond, the male attendant spoke into his radio. "Security needed at 2A. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't about a seat anymore. This was about power. It was about reminding her that, no matter how qualified or prepared she was, they could still make her small. Chapter 4. The Walk. Minutes later, 2 uniformed security officers boarded the plane. "Ma'am, please gather your belongings and exit the aircraft," one of them said with a rehearsed tone. Savannah had a choice. Stand her ground and risk an unnecessary scene, or walk away, dignity intact. She stood slowly, lifting her bag from the overhead bin. The moment stretched. Every pair of eyes was on her as she turned toward the door. She met the lead flight attendant's gaze one last time. The woman didn't look triumphant. She looked indifferent. Like Savannah, was nothing more than another task to complete before her shift ended. Savannah walked off the plane in silence. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 5. The Call. Stepping into the terminal, Savannah's grip tightened around her carry-on handle. Humiliated. Dismissed. As if she didn't belong. For what? A power trip masked as policy? A prejudice hidden behind procedure? She took a slow breath, steadying herself. This wasn't the time to react emotionally. She had built her career by thinking several moves ahead. If they thought they had put her in her place, they had no idea what was coming. Pulling out her phone, Savannah scrolled through her contacts. She tapped one. The call connected after 2 rings. "Savannah? You're calling me at the airport. This should be good." "MK," Savannah said sharply. "I need a favor." Within minutes, the wheels were in motion. Calls were made. Emails were sent. Meetings were scheduled. Because Savannah wasn't just a passenger on Flight 2086. She was a key player in aviation finance. And that airline had just picked a fight with the wrong woman. Chapter 6. The Takeover. 2 weeks later, Savannah walked through LAX again. But everything was different. She wasn't a passenger anymore. She wasn't a woman being forced off a flight. She was the new owner of the airline. The hostile takeover happened fast. The moment news of her removal hit the press, the airline's stock plummeted. Investors panicked. The board scrambled. Savannah and her partners swooped in. Within 10 days, leadership changed hands. The CEO was out. The director of operations resigned. And Savannah? She wasn't just sitting on the board. She was running the show. Chapter 7. The Return. Walking through the terminal, Savannah's heels clicked against the polished floors. Every step deliberate. Every move calculated. She spotted a familiar face ahead. The lead flight attendant. The woman who had smirked as security escorted her off the plane. Savannah slowed just enough to be seen. The woman looked up. Recognition. Panic. Savannah said nothing at first. She let the silence do its work. Then, with quiet authority, she spoke. "You work for me now." The flight attendant paled. "I was just following policy," she stammered. Savannah raised a hand. "Save it," she said coolly. "I'm not here for an apology. I'm here to make something clear." She paused. "You can learn from this, or you can pack your things." And then she walked away, leaving the choice in the woman's hands. Because real power wasn't about revenge. It was about control. And Savannah Cole had taken it. Chapter 8. The Lesson. As she stepped into her office later that day, Savannah reflected on the events that had transpired. This wasn't just a victory. It was a lesson. Never underestimate the person you try to silence. Because one day, they might be the one signing your paycheck. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. More real-life lessons. More stories that keep you thinking. Because power shifts faster than you think.